Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video we're going to be looking at something different from anatomy. We're going to be looking at rendering. Today I'm only going to focus on black and white values, just because of how important it is that you understand how to use values when it comes to rendering, because that builds the foundation in which you can put colors on top of that and make your art start to stand out. Yeah, so let's get into it. First thing we're going to be looking at is the sphere. This is probably the best example that you're going to have for rendering. Just gonna go to like my sketching brush and just draw the cast shadow again. Okay, there you go. So we've got our sphere, our cast shadow, and let's say our lighting source is coming from here. So just gonna create a new layer. You're gonna put it underneath. You can always set the sketch to multiply. So that it stands out a bit more. We're gonna take like a neutral grey kind of color. Not many complicated brushes. You don't need complicated brushes for this kind of thing. Just a round brush, some slight type of blending brush, like a bristle brush. I like using the bristle brush from Ahmed Aldoori. His brush pack is free, you just have to get it from his Gumroad. And maybe also like a speckle brush or a scatter brush, something that looks a bit distorted, kind of like these two, for specular highlights. And that's pretty much all that you need. You can also get the speckle kind of brushes from Ahmed Aldoori as well. Yeah. So I'm just gonna take our mid-tone kind of color and we'll block in this shape. You can just take like the rubber and rub out anything that we don't need. There you go. I'm just gonna lighten this up. So in Procreate, it's like this star looking thing. Use saturation and brightness, and you can just bring the brightness up a bit. Yeah, so I'm just gonna bring the brightness up. So we're gonna take this base color. I've set my eyedropper to just tap with my finger, but you can set it to whatever you want. Gonna go halfway to black. That's kind of a rule that I learned from Ahmed Aldoori. Not every transition needs to be halfway to black, it's just something that you can roughly use for shadows. And then clipping mask or alpha lock would work as well, but I'm just going to use like a clipping mask in this example, and we just lightly paint like a rim around the edge, kind of like that. I'm going to create a new layer. On this layer I can draw in a cast shadow. there's our cast shadow. I'm just going to take the rubber to neaten this up a bit. And then go to your mixer brush, take your bristle brush, and just blend that shadow shape out across the surface of your sphere. Don't have to press hard, just press lightly. And that gives you your what do you call it? Your core shadow. Yeah. And we're just gonna go on the other side of your sphere. Create a layer clipping mask. Just bump it up a tiny bit. This is gonna be our highlight color. Just gonna blend that in all the same as well. There you go. So we've got our highlight color as well. Create a new layer, grab your speckle brush, go a bit brighter. We're just gonna put in a specular highlight, something that can help, and I guess this is a bit of color theory, but take your gray, like let's say we're in the reds, if we were to go to like a green and put in green, it's gonna stand out more because it's against a red kind of, what do you call it? Because it's against a red background, because we're putting in the opposite colors. So yeah, there's our specular highlight. Okay, so I'm just gonna rub out part of the pencil drawing, just so everything's a bit more visible. Okay, and the final thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put ambient occlusion in there. So I'm just gonna grab the shadow, well, what we could do is we could grab like this mid-tone that we've got here, go to round brush, paint a bit of that in over the top, take my bristle brush and just blend that out. Yeah, there's my ambient occlusion. Can just lower the opacity to make it less pronounced. There you go. Okay, so I'm just gonna label everything, and I'll just show you, just to show you what ambient occlusion is. It's when the light hits like the surface of the ground and then bounces back up onto the object. And so even though it's in shadow, you might see the ambient occlusion inside a shadow. So I'm just gonna write out highlights, midtones, and shadows. So our highlights, we're gonna have the specular highlight, we're gonna have our highlight side. In terms of shadows, you're gonna get this core shadow, which is just, it's in between that light side and the darkest part, which is on the core, and that's gonna be like your midtones. And then you're going to have your shadow side, which is the part that is facing away from light. That's just going to be your shadow. And then you've got your cast shadow where absolutely no light is getting to, and that's your darkest shadow, so cast shadow. But there isn't really much difference between like your shadow side and your cast shadow, so if you squint they should actually kind of just meld into one, and then that's broken up by your ambient occlusion. That you see happening on the bottom side amongst the shadow. So that's the basics. Let's see how that's actually applied to a face. So I'm gonna take this image as an example. We can insert this in. And just change the layer mode to a luminosity, and that will give you your black and white. Or another way that you can do it is by leaving the layer normal, creating a clipping mask. If you take like a black and you completely paint over the image, and you change the layer mode to color, then that will also do the same thing that luminosity does. So those are two different ways that you can go about that. But for this demonstration, we're just going to do luminosity. So I'm just going to show you where all those things are. So let's look at cast shadows and the shadow side. Just need to create a new layer. You can see, okay, first of all squint. That's what I want you to do. I want you to squint first, and you'll start to see like the breaking up of shapes where you find what you'd call the shadow side or the cast shadow. And even in the hair, yeah, although when your eyes are open, yeah, maybe you see variation. If you squint, then actually you'll start to see that you could just break all the hair down into two different sides. And so all of this is going to give us our cast shadow. And also like it, yeah, it starts to kind of creep. I guess it does actually. Kind of starts to creep there, and come around there. That's our cast shadow in red. Let's go to orange. Orange is going to be our midtones. And so actually what I would say when it comes to midtones is actually a lot of it is in midtone. Don't get me wrong, there are highlights, but actually there's a lot of shape that is kind of all in midtone. And so here you're not only learning about shadows, midtones and highlights, but actually when you sketch these out, think about the shapes that you're making, because it's also teaching you shape design. So I would actually put like all of this I'd put all of that into like a mid-tone. So our highlights, you can see we've got one here. I guess we've got one on the nose as well. It's not that pronounced. Got one here on the lip, here on the lip, this line strip coming down here. I'm not sure what it's created by, but maybe it's like blinds that are obscuring light. Yeah, maybe that's all I would choose for like highlights. In terms of specular highlights, let's go to like a blue to show that. You can see that it's happening here around the eyes. Maybe you'd also put like the highlight of the eye at the same level. And then finally, maybe it's up to you how much you want to give to it, but I would probably actually put the lips as specular highlights as well. And so that would be where our specular highlights are. And so you can see actually every face that you come across can be broken down. It's more just about having understanding of the planes, the faces, and breaking things down into highlights, midtone, shadows, and then also specular highlights. If you want to see where ambient occlusion is, let's go to like a purple to show that. There's like a tiny bit here that you start to see at the edge of the shadow, and then I guess like on the edge of this shadow you're starting to see tiny bits of ambient occlusion. So there and there is where I'd say I'd see ambient occlusion. Yeah, so taking all of that into account, I'm going to do a sketch and I'll show you how I'd go about studying this. And I recommend that, you know, if you want to get good at art, if you want to get good at drawing faces and people and all sorts of things, that actually learning how to simplify is an essential tool. By no means does your sketch have to be like 100% accurate, but try and do your best to measure things out. If you need help in terms of faces, refer back to the anatomy series or with the episode on faces. So I'm just putting like a rough block in. This is how I go about doing faces. There's no need to copy the way I go about doing faces, but if it helps you visualize things, then by all means you can utilize the way I go about doing faces. Okay, just gonna remove that now. I'm trying to just follow the geometry of the face. Like, something I do is I draw like a circle underneath, and then that kind of helps me measure out the rest of where that eyebrow and the eyelid is. Drawing faces is kind of all about, well, one, understanding the skull, but then also measurements. So if you actually want to get things accurate, try and measure where is the, you know, like the tip or the corner of the eye measured up to if I make a straight line down, and that will start to help you find measurements and relationships between things. Yeah, so by no means does your drawing need to be 100% accurate, because in all honesty it will never really get there, but do try and measure relationships between different parts of the face, and that will start to give you measurements. Okay, so create a new layer. You're just gonna put it underneath your sketch. Gonna take like a neutral grey with your round brush and just gonna block that in. Then what we can do, just to get the form back, we can take like the lasso tool, just go around everything that we want. Then rub out all the extra stuff that we don't need. That gives us a base to start using the clipping mask. Clipping mask. Remember the rule, you can go halfway to black to get your shadow shape. And what you can do is you can actually just paint in like a pretty dark thing over the top. 1 second. Just gonna separate the sketch from that layer, cut, paste, and I'm just gonna set the sketch to multiply. So now, because we've set the sketch to multiply, we can still see the lines underneath, well, still see the lines beneath the shadow. So we're just gonna take it's up to you what brush really, but you can do it with a round brush. You're just going to take the round brush and we're just going to paint out all the areas that aren't receiving as harsh of a shadow. To be honest, I could probably just paint all of this out and then just paint down from there. That's gonna give us our initial thing to work with, maybe a bit more black. So it's kind of a process of painting things out and painting things back in. But what we're trying to end up with is a good value structure. And this is going to teach you not only how to simplify, but how to have good shape design as well. Because in my mind, that's a really good thing to learn when it comes to stylization. And here also could open up that eye. And I recommend, if you want to get good at this, squint. Try squinting, and that will give you the shapes that you need. There you go. Anywhere else we want to put some shadow, just here, where the eyes are as well. Just underneath. And this is probably the best exercise that you can do to start learning how to use values. Zoom out and see if it reads, you know. If you've got it to read, take your mixer brush. I like to use the bristle brush from Ahmed Aldori's brush set, and then lightly go over that. He has his brush set for free on his Gumroad if you want to get that, so you can use some of the brushes I use. But brushes aren't as important, it's more about knowing what to blend out. You don't need like a complicated amount of brushes. So I'm now just blending out the areas that have soft transitions. You just go around the face blending those areas out, and as you start to do that, things are can just put a bit of blending in the shadows as well. There you go. So for highlights, take your midtone, color pick your midtone, then go like halfway to white. That will give you your highlight color. So here we're just gonna use the round brush to block them in. And then in terms of specular highlights, where would I put those? I would put those in like, so on this corner where the eye is, on this corner here, the edge of the lip up here, and finally in that lip there. And that's where I'd put like the specular highlights. And that pretty much wraps up. Yeah, that pretty much wraps up our study. All this that you're seeing here is actually going to inform how well you're able to paint, just from understanding value, because these are the foundation blocks that build up the rest of painting with color. So hopefully that's been helpful. Hopefully that's taught you a bit about value. I'll see you next week for another video, and if you like videos like this, then yeah, subscribe, because there'll be more to come.